Hitler and the Nazis are using their mastery of design and technology to seize total power for themselves before plunging the whole world into its greatest ever tragedy. Hitler has heard of a cultural event in the small town of Coburg, north of Munich. Socialists and communists will be taking part, so Hitler has decided to crash this party with hundreds of his paramilitaries, the stormtroopers. He's taken the bold step of hiring a special train. He orders his men to gather here at Munich's railway station.
The order came. The whole lot of the stormtroops was to turn out. We were about 600 strong. It was a Saturday in the middle of October. We were to assemble early at the central station and bring along rations for 2 days. The band was to march at the front. Hitler turned up well beforehand, and we found a special train awaiting us. The music rang out gaily in the early morning air, and the people had hung out flags to make a sort of festival of the occasion. We stopped once or twice during the journey to pick up a few more of our comrades from the more outlying places, and arrived at last, 800 strong.
They disembark here at Coburg's now run-down railway station. City officials beg Hitler not to march his troops through these streets. They're afraid of conflict with local communists, but Hitler angrily defies them. Conflict is what he wants. The march of the stormtroopers soon becomes a riot.
Sure enough, we soon encountered storms of abuse from the crowds en route. Hitler led, and we followed. Stones, however, began to fly around. Then things got hotter. The Reds set upon us with iron rods and cudgels. That was going a bit too far. Hitler swung round, flourished his walking stick. That was the signal, and we flung ourselves upon our assailants. We counterattacked for all we knew. It was jolly hard work, I can tell you. They rained tiles on us from the roofs and windows and tore up the cobblestones for missiles.
But with such slight opposition, it doesn't take very long for the Nazi stormtroopers to demoralize and then scatter their enemies. Once the violence has died down, they spend the night here at the local shooting club. The next day, they go sightseeing at Coburg Castle before returning home to Munich. This bloody riot is portrayed in Nazi mythology as a tremendous victory over the hated communists. 10 years later, a special badge is awarded to those who were with Hitler in Coburg. It becomes the Nazi Party's most prestigious award. Hitler's credibility as a street fighter and die-hard anti-communist is now established. Enemies of the stormtroopers call them ill-disciplined thugs, but their smart brown uniforms are key to making them look respectable and popular. But who makes these uniforms? Metzingen, a small town in southern Germany. It has a long association with the fashion business, right up to today. It's also long been the home of the Hugo Boss company and the location of its worldwide headquarters. The Boss family's first shop was here on Hindenburg Street. Hugo Ferdinand Boss takes over his parents' shop just after the First World War, but he has bigger plans. He decides to start making clothes, opening his factory in 1924 with just 10 sewing machines. The workers make everything from underwear to traditional Loden coats. But one of the company's first big commissions is for a large batch of coloured shirts for a distributor in Munich, including brown shirts for the Nazi Party and stormtroopers. Hugo Boss may not have known who the shirts were for at this time, but in later adverts he describes his company as a supplier of party equipment since 1924. The Hugo Boss factory is just one of many small and medium-sized firms that make the huge number of uniforms needed by all the different Nazi organizations. All these companies profit from Nazi Party and later Nazi government contracts. But the actual design of these uniforms is the work of other people. One is Walter Heck, a badge designer. In 1929, he creates one of the most notorious symbols in history, the SS runes. Heck isn't well off, so he accepts just 2.5 Reichsmarks, about $25 today, to allow the SS to use his new, sinister symbol. Another key Nazi designer is Karl Diebitsch. He joins the Nazi Party in 1920 and creates many of its most significant items, including the SS dagger. In 1932, Diebitsch and Heck worked together to create their most important and most notorious product, the new all-black uniform for the SS. By this time, the Hugo Boss factory is supplying uniforms to several Nazi organizations, the Stormtroopers, the Hitler Youth, and the SS. All these uniforms, badges, and symbols help forge a common bond among party members. The unified look also projects the image of a disciplined and organized party. The Nazis are determined to maintain a single style and approach in everything they do.
It isn't simply about Hitler. We're also talking about thousands and tens of thousands and eventually hundreds of thousands of people who are working at local level, giving of their time, giving of their resources. They're doing it every night. I mean, these are people who are going out, organizing rallies, organizing marches and so forth, without Hitler being in sight.
They developed a correspondence school for training public speakers, which claimed to have trained about 6,000 speakers by 1933. Now, this was significant because it allowed the Nazis to send speakers to every village and neighborhood in Germany. Towns that had never had a political speaker before suddenly got regular visits from Nazi speakers. Now, these speakers weren't of Goebbels or Hitler's quality, but they didn't have to be. They brought the Nazi message to areas that hadn't heard any political speakers before.
And one also shouldn't forget that this was an important source of revenue for the party. This is a party which, in its earlier years, activities on the ground are very largely self-financed. That is, by dues, by people contributing small amounts to the party, and also paying not merely membership dues, but also fees to come to hear the speaker. And if a regional group could get Hitler to speak, they could make a lot of money.
They also manufacture a lot of regime tat. All those little badges and so forth for party rallies and everything else is actually a way of financing the Nazi Party. How does it have so much money? Well, it's a retail organization. It's selling gaudy merchandise, bright shiny buttons, and all the rest of it as a way of keeping itself going and paying its officials. So there is a market dynamic to the Nazi Party.
The meetings and rallies are major money-making opportunities.
You had posters, you had banners, you had music, you had ceremonial entrance of SD stormtroopers and flags. You had lively speeches.
For the great masses of our people, sufficient food should be provided so they can work with all their strength.
What the Nazis were very careful to do was to make all of their events entertaining. So you'd have, for example, a choir of the Hitler Youth, you'd have a brass band, then you'd show movies.
The point is that it was a show as well as a political meeting.
One academic had said, actually, a Nazi Party rally in the early 1930s was one of the best ways you could have spent your time. And it conveyed this idea of excitement that we're on the brink of an epic era. They're awfully good at doing that.
By 1932, Hitler feels confident enough to make an audacious bid for power. He launches a nationwide election campaign to become president of Germany. To reach as many people as possible, he does something no German politician has ever done before. He takes to the air.
Well, it was totally novel. Very few people had ever been by plane. Hitler recognized, though, the utility that he could hit many cities in a single day.
It's not the huge rallies necessarily in Berlin or Hamburg or Munich or whatever, but in district towns where he attracts 10, 15, 20,000 people.
It made for the most dramatic arrival possible.
Hitler's aircraft, the Junkers 52-3M, is the very latest technology, only a year old. He uses it to deliver 46 speeches in less than a month.
The idea of Hitler coming down through the clouds, attracting these tens of thousands of people, many times a day, moving from one area to the next, made a big impression. And he was the first person to do this.
Everyone could have a direct experience of this rock star charisma.
Anticipation could be built. Often the schedule fell behind. Hitler was an hour or two late in arriving. But that only built attention. And when Hitler would finally arrive, there would be an explosion of cheers and Sieg Heils and so forth. So it was a very interesting and effective method of building the Hitler myth.
Nazi propaganda exploits the image of the daring Hitler, not afraid of this still quite risky technology.
One has to remember that this is a young man, a relatively young man for a politician. He is the representative of that younger generation who comes up from the trenches and as such is making a big impression on the German population.
Despite Hitler's dynamic and relentless campaigning, he doesn't win the presidency, losing to the incumbent Paul von Hindenburg. But in fierce parliamentary elections, the Nazis do become the largest political party in the Reichstag, opposed by a similar number of communists and social democrats. German politics is increasingly polarized and violent. Democracy itself is becoming discredited. There are rumors the army is preparing a coup. Reluctantly, President Hindenburg appoints Hitler as chancellor to create some kind of stability. Hitler grasps this opportunity to start the process of Nazi political domination.